Curse of Brilliance is the observation that when somebody highly successful and prolific is analyzing or sharing what makes them successful and prolific, unwittingly tend to overemphasize the things that they found very difficult, and they underemphasize, underplay, or altogether ignore the importance of things at which they were naturally brilliant. I'll share a couple of examples to make this concrete, because I think as we were talking about content and consuming content, I do think that it is very essential in this age of exponentially growing content that we become more critical thinkers about the content and what it means and what content to apply and what content to perhaps take with a grain of salt, even if that content is coming from somebody who's otherwise extremely successful at whatever it is that they did. The way I discovered this idea of the Curse of Brilliance is this quote that gets shared often online, and if you share it on Twitter, you're guaranteed to get a lot of likes. It goes something like, when art critics get together, they talk about form and structure and meaning. But when artists get together, they talk about where you can buy cheap turpentine. And apparently this quote is attributed to Picasso. The point is, people hear this, they get impressed, and they conclude that if you want to be great at something, if you want to be Picasso, you should ignore all the abstract stuff, which is like form, structure, and meaning. And you should just focus on the tactics that the great ones employ. The tactics being, where can I get cheap turpentine? And in the business world, it's what's the process for getting this done? Or help me understand this tactic. Give me tactics. Give me things that I can use tomorrow. So that's one quote. The other one that had bugged me for a while is this whole amateur stock strategy and professional stock logistics. And so the idea being that if you want to be a true professional, you should fixate on logistics and operations. It's all those McKinsey types that just don't actually do much that talk strategy, and they are amateurs. So my observation is that these kinds of conclusions are just basically flawed and harmful. So getting into the reason why. So why do, when great artists get together, they talk about where you can buy cheap turpentine? And why do you think they skip over all the abstract stuff? The real reason is that these are gifted artists. They have a gift or gifts that very few human beings ever born possess. And yet, because they're artists, they tend to be poor. And so therefore, they talk about cheap turpentine. They don't need to discuss the form and structure and meaning because they just get it. They're gifted with that. And it's similar with the professionals talking about logistics, because real professionals, they have a deep strategic sense, which is why you would call them up on stage and have them speak to you. So what happens to people when they're asked? Now, this is a poor question to ask, but it still gets asked all the time. So what is the reason for your success? So you ask somebody incredibly prolific, a billionaire founder, what were the ingredients for your success? Here's the reality. Number one, say if it's a billionaire visionary founder who's asked this question, right? Oftentimes, until they are old enough and mature enough, people don't even understand their innate gifts that cause them to have that extreme outlier success. Because in order to reach there, this person would have had to have exceptional intuition and instinct and creativity, insight. And such a brilliant visionary founder, they can see something that nobody else can see. They take these kind of gifts for granted. They don't even know that they exist because they think everybody operates that way. So that's one reason. What they often will end up sharing are the things that were tough for them. They will talk about the grind, and they'll talk about the operations as they were scaling the business. And they will talk about the grit, the determination, etc., etc. Granted, all of those things are very vital, but we confuse necessary and sufficient conditions. The other reason why people end up overemphasizing these things, like they'll say luck, they'll say grit, they'll say building a great culture, they'll say building an awesome execution machine or running operations, right? These will be the responses of lessons learned or what enabled your success. There's another reason why all of these things are being said, especially the luck thing, because it is the popular answer to provide. If somebody asked you, What makes you so amazing at XYZ? And if you said, well, it was my creativity, or it's my cognitive empathy, or it's some core skill, in most parts of the world, it's not going to be a popular answer. But if you just say, it was luck, like I consider myself really lucky, that gives the audience hope. Because if you say creativity, which is actually the truth, it's not going to be the popular answer. So understand that whether it's unintentional or intentional, this curse of brilliance strikes in many situations and in a lot of pieces of content that get shared. And one last thing I'll share here, and this is very unfortunate in most places around the world, we don't talk openly about what we are great at, even if we understand it. And we are doing a disservice to others. Because if people don't understand what the real ingredients of being great at this craft are, and if we keep saying, well, it's grit and it's just working day in and day out on your operations, or it's luck, you're misguiding them. Sure, they love to hear it, but it's not actually helping anybody. If anything, it's hurting. So as you evaluate, as you review content online along these lines, I want you to understand the curse of brilliance.